So, you're ready to build your first gaming PC. You've seen the epic setups, the insane benchmarks, and you want a piece of that action. And then you see the price tags. It's easy to see why the idea of a super cheap gaming PC is so tempting. The promise of 1080p gaming for just a few $100? It sounds like the perfect entry point. You start browsing marketplaces, looking at budget parts lists, and thinking, I can totally do this. The idea is to get in the game now and worry about upgrades later. It's a compelling thought, and honestly, a path many of us have considered or even taken when we first started. The problem is, this path is often paved with disappointment. What starts as a savvy, budget-conscious decision can quickly turn into a cycle of frustration, unexpected costs, and a PC that just doesn't deliver on its promise. It's a classic case of you get what you pay for, but in the world of PC building, the consequences are more than just a subpar product. It's a system that actively works against you. You end up with a machine that struggles to play the games you bought it for, and the easy upgrade path you envision turns out to be a dead end. These aren't niche, expert-level mistakes we're talking about. These are the common pitfalls, the classic traps that so many first-time builders fall into. I've seen it happen countless times, and I've even made some of these mistakes myself way back in the day. So, in this video, we're going to break down the 3 biggest mistakes people make when trying to build a cheap gaming PC. The goal here isn't to discourage you, but to arm you with the knowledge to build smarter. So your first PC build is a triumph, not a tragedy. Let's get into it. Alright, let's start with one of the most common budget strategies you'll see recommended online, buying an old, pre-built office PC, like a Dell Optiplex or an HP Pavilion, and just dropping a graphics card into it. On the surface, this seems genius. You get a case, a motherboard, a CPU, RAM, and a power supply, all for a super low price, sometimes under $100. The thinking is, all I need to do is add a cheap GPU, and boom, I have a gaming PC. It's the ultimate shortcut, right? The foundation is already there, you just need to add the one part that makes it a gaming machine. The reality, however, is a lot more complicated. These office PCs were never designed for gaming. They were built for spreadsheets and web browsing, which means every single component inside was chosen for cost-effectiveness and low power consumption, not performance. The motherboards are often proprietary, with custom shapes and connectors that don't fit standard PC cases. This immediately kills any future plans you might have had to move your components to a better case with more airflow, which, by the way, you're going to need. Then there's the power supply unit, or PSU. The ones included in these systems are almost always low wattage, unrated units that are just barely enough to power the original hardware. They often lack the necessary PCIe power connectors to even plug in a dedicated graphics card. So your first simple upgrade immediately requires you to buy a new power supply. But wait, because the case and motherboard are proprietary, a standard ATX power supply might not even fit or connect properly. You see how this starts to spiral? And we haven't even talked about the CPU and RAM. You might get lucky with an older Core i5 or i7, but it's likely several generations old. This means it's going to be a significant bottleneck for any modern GPU you install, and the upgrade path is basically non-existent. The motherboard's chipset will only support CPUs from that same old generation, so a meaningful processor upgrade means replacing the motherboard. And since the motherboard is a proprietary shape, you'll need a new case too. Suddenly, your cheap starting point has forced you to replace almost every single part. Ultimately, this strategy trades a higher upfront cost for a series of smaller, frustrating, and often more expensive purchases down the line. You're locked into an outdated platform with poor airflow, limited power, and zero room for growth. You end up spending more money to fix the problems of your cheap foundation than if you had just saved up a little bit longer to buy modern, standard components from the start. It's a classic penny-wise, pound-foolish scenario that leaves you with a compromised machine and a lot of regret. So, let's say you've avoided the old office PC trap and you're buying new parts. This is where the second major pitfall comes in, not doing the research on component compatibility. When you're trying to save every last dollar, It's tempting to just hunt for the cheapest CPU, the cheapest motherboard, and the cheapest RAM you can find, and then just assume they'll all work together. This is a recipe for disaster. PC components are not like Lego bricks. They are highly specific pieces of technology that need to speak the same language to function. The most common compatibility issue new builders run into is between the CPU and the motherboard. For example, you can't just put an AMD processor into a motherboard designed for an Intel chip, and vice versa. But it gets more granular than that. Even within the same brand, different generations of CPUs require different sockets on the motherboard. An Intel 14th Gen CPU won't fit in a motherboard from 5 years ago. You have to match the CPU's socket type, like LGA 1700 for modern Intel or AM5 for modern AMD, with the exact same socket on the motherboard. Beyond the physical socket, there's also the chipset to consider. The chipset is the brain of the motherboard that controls communication between all your components. A cheaper motherboard might have the right socket for your fancy new CPU, but its older, budget-tier chipset might not support features like CPU overclocking or faster RAM speeds. So you could be paying for a high-performance, overclockable K-series Intel CPU, but be completely unable to use its main feature because you paired it with a budget H-series motherboard. You're leaving a ton of performance on the table. RAM compatibility is another classic headache. You might see a great deal on some really fast DDR5 RAM, but if the motherboard you bought only supports the older DDR4 standard, it physically will not fit. The notches on the sticks are in different places to prevent this, but it's an easy mistake to make if you're just looking at prices online. Even if you get the right type, like DDR4, the speed of the RAM might not be officially supported by your specific CPU or motherboard, leading to instability or forcing it to run at a much slower default speed. This lack of research doesn't just lead to poor performance, it can lead to a system that doesn't even turn on. Imagine the frustration of spending hours carefully assembling your new PC, managing all the cables, and then hitting the power button only for nothing to happen. Then begins the painful process of troubleshooting, taking everything apart and realizing you bought two parts that were never meant to be together. Using a tool like PC Part Picker is essential. It automatically checks for these basic compatibilities and can save you a world of time, money, and heartache. This brings us to the third, and honestly probably the most critical mistake in a budget gaming PC build: buying a cheap graphics card. The GPU, or graphics processing unit, is the single most important component for gaming performance. It's the part that does all the heavy lifting when it comes to rendering those awesome 3D worlds, characters, and effects in your games. Now, when you're on a tight budget, it can be super tempting to spend most of your money on the CPU, RAM, and maybe even a flashy case, and then just grab whatever GPU you can afford with whatever cash is left over. But yeah, this is completely backward. A low-end graphics card is going to bottleneck your entire system. What that means is, no matter how powerful your CPU is, your gaming experience will be limited by the weakest link, the GPU. You could have the latest and greatest Core i9 processor, but if you pair it with, say, a GT 1030 or an RX 6400, you're just going to get terrible performance in modern games. Your powerful CPU will basically be sitting around waiting for the struggling GPU to feed it frames to process. It's kind of like putting bicycle tires on a Ferrari. The engine has all the power in the world, but it just can't put it down on the road. The result in-game? It's a choppy, low-resolution, and honestly just plain ugly experience. You'll be forced to turn all the graphical settings down to low, maybe even reduce the resolution to below 1080p, and you'll still struggle to keep a stable frame rate. The whole reason you built a gaming PC, to enjoy games at higher fidelity and performance than a console, is totally negated. Your expensive build ends up delivering an experience that's worse than a PlayStation or Xbox, which just makes the whole thing feel like a massive waste of money. And on top of that, the cheapest tier of new graphics cards often lacks modern features that are becoming essential for a good gaming experience. Stuff like hardware-accelerated ray tracing, which gives you incredibly realistic lighting, will be completely off the table. Plus, You'll miss out on performance-boosting tech like NVIDIA's DLSS or AMD's FSR, which use AI to upscale lower-resolution images and give you a big FPS boost with barely any loss in visuals. These features can make a mid-range card feel like a high-end one, and you're just locking yourself out of them by scraping the bottom of the barrel. So your build philosophy should really center around the GPU. Decide on your target resolution and frame rate first, maybe 1080p at 60 FPS. Then find the best graphics card you can afford that actually hits that target in the games you want to play. From there, you build the rest of the system around it, choosing a CPU and RAM that are good enough to keep up with that GPU without causing any bottlenecks. A balanced system with a solid mid-range GPU will always give you a better gaming experience than a lopsided build with a high-end CPU and a bargain bin graphics card. So there you have it. The trifecta of budget PC building mistakes, starting with a dead-end office PC, ignoring component compatibility, and, most importantly, skimping on the graphics card. The common thread here is that trying to find the absolute cheapest path often leads to a more expensive and honestly, just more frustrating journey in the long run. Building a PC isn't just about snapping parts together. It's about creating a balanced, synergistic system where every component can actually perform to its potential. A great gaming experience is the goal, and that takes a bit more than just hunting for the lowest price on every part. True value in PC building comes from smart planning and wise investment, not from cutting corners. It's about understanding that spending a little more upfront on a quality motherboard, a decent power supply, and especially a capable graphics card will pay off big time in performance, stability, and future upgradability. It's honestly better to wait and save up for another month to get a balanced system you'll be happy with for years, rather than jumping in right away with a compromised build that you'll regret within weeks. The satisfaction of a successful build that runs your favorite games smoothly is totally worth the patience. I hope this helps you on your journey to building your first PC. Don't let these pitfalls discourage you. Instead, use them as a guide for what to watch out for. Do your research, use tools like PC Part Picker, watch reviews, and build a machine that's not just cheap, but smart. A well-planned budget build can be an incredibly rewarding experience, and I really want you to have that success. If you have any questions or your own budget build stories, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.